what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co-host, Aiden Mulcrone. Football is here, Aiden. Fall camp got kicked off today for Michigan State, and so we're excited to jump on here. I just got home from East Lansing about an hour and a half ago, so I had a little bit of time to relax before we jumped on the pod. But yeah, a lot of excitement out of East Lansing right now with the first day of practice. We got to talk to Mel Tucker. We got to talk to both of the quarterbacks who are expected to compete for the job this fall in Katin and Noah Kim. Dillon Tatum, defensive back, was also there to meet with the media and answer some questions, and wide receiver Montorie Foster. So plenty of content to talk about today as Michigan State kicks off fall football practice. And after today's practice, they've got 24 more before the Spartans kick off against Central Michigan on September 1st. So yeah, we'll jump right into things, Aiden. And the kind of the, not like this huge breaking news story or anything like that, but one of the bigger point that came out of today was the fact that redshirt senior center Nick Samak did not practice with the team today. He was at practice. He just didn't participate. And so that was just kind of something that stood out, just because, being the first practice and whatnot, it was a little bit of a surprise that he wasn't able to participate today. But we didn't get any details as far as if he's dealing with some kind of workout injury maybe that he got during summer conditioning, if it's something lingering from last year. Didn't get really any details because we just don't get those out of Mel Tucker. He's not prone to give out that kind of information, understandably so. But I guess, Aiden, we talked about this kind of going back to spring, the fact that Michigan State had 19 healthy bodies available for spring practice, and just how that added depth was such a positive coming off of last season when there was a real limit to the amount of bodies that Michigan State had available up front. And then even in the season, like once, a couple guys go down and you're kind of thrusting guys who have not played major college football yet into those roles. So I guess, what was your reaction to hearing that Samak didn't practice today? And then what's your thoughts on some of these guys, younger guys? I know Dallas Fincher, I think, ran with the ones today. He's a redshirt junior, been around for a few years. Kevin Wigginton is a redshirt sophomore. He ran with the twos today in Samak's absence. So just your kind of general thoughts on that, Aiden.
Yeah, I mean, the Samak thing, him being out, I mean, it doesn't really concern me that much now. I think it'll concern people maybe when it's a little bit closer to the season, but obviously it's day one, so there still is a lot more time. And it was he sat out, it was undisclosed on reasoning or anything, so I don't think it's anything to be skeptical of right now. Maybe closer towards the season, then you start getting a little more skeptical. But I did see something going to the whole line. I did see someone tweet like a first group, a second group, a third group. I can't remember the exact the exact lines for all three groups, but the fact that I think it was all but 2 players of those 15 guys, all but 2 of them were scholarship guys. They were all scholarship players. So I think the fact that this line is healthy as opposed to spring of 2022, I think there were 7 healthy scholarship linemen. So that's a huge difference there. And yeah, the Fincher being the first center without Samak and Wigginton being the backup is definitely something to keep an eye on, because I know Duplain at Big Ten Media Days was really high on Kevin Wigginton. And then Ethan Boyd looked like he was in the second group behind Spencer Brown from what I remember, which Duplain talked about Ethan Boyd as another guy who he was really high on and said showed a lot of improvement in this offseason and is really, competing hard for that starting job. And Spencer Brown right now has that job, and he's got a lot more playing experience within the last 2 seasons. So, that, he's competing for a job that could, over a starter. Like, he's trying to beat out a current starter right now. So that's big. And yeah, and Tucker and Mosley both really preach competition at media days. So I think that's something to really keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and Tucker was asked about. Obviously, he doesn't really talk about when guys sit out. He's not going to give details or anything like that. That's just not how he rolls. But he was asked, "What did you see out of those younger guys who got some added reps today, just because Samac was out?" And he kind of laid it down. He says, we brought those guys here to play. That's part of building a program, is when you add depth and you add bodies, you stack recruiting classes on top of each other. When something like this happens, and again, we're not trying to make this into a big deal. We have no idea if this is what this was about. It could have been even just a feeling ill type thing, if for all we know, based on, we didn't get any specifics. But when you stacked recruiting classes now that Michigan State has done over the last couple of years, you do have these bodies, and they're bringing in 4 or 5, sometimes even 6 offensive linemen in a class. And so now we're starting to see the fruition of Chris Kapilovich, his recruiting efforts. And so I believe Fincher was expected to be kind of that backup center for Samac this year, and so this is like it's in place. They've had their guy there regardless. So again, not trying to cause any alarm here, just noting what happened, or what was observed at practice today. As far as you mentioned the kind of the groupings of offensive linemen, like the first team. This is according to Chris Solari, who was at practice today. He had Brandon Baldwin at left tackle, JD Duplain at left guard, Fincher at center, Gino Vandermark at right guard, and Spencer Brown at right tackle. Any surprises there?
No, not really. I think for me, from what I've heard, I guess, kind of, Duplain talked about how Ethan Boyd is competing for that, starting job. I think Keyshawn Blackstock is really the only other guy who, I don't want to say has a chance, because I think there are a lot of guys on this team that have a chance to start. But I think heading into week 1, if Keyshawn Blackstock started, I would not be surprised. So I think besides those 2 guys, Boyd and Blackstock, I would say I'd be shocked if, any of the other 3 guys on the second or third line really make a jump to start. But yeah, I think a lot of people kind of assumed Vandermark would be the starting right guard this year, along, on the interior. And then, that I think the right tackle position and then left tackle are really up for grabs. I just think the fact that Brandon Baldwin and Spencer Brown have more experience is kind of the reason why they would be, considered in the first group on day, what is it? Day something like what? First week of practice.
First practice, yeah, sure.
So,
yep. Yeah, so we'll kind of end the all line talk right there. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the comments. We'll answer as many of those as we can. But we'll move on, just because we did have both quarterbacks available to spoke to the media this afternoon after practice. We got to talk to Katin Hauser, kind of our first interaction with Katin since spring practice, just because, or even hearing anything about Katin, because there weren't many questions asked at Big Ten Media Days about Katin Hauser. And so we didn't get a whole lot of sound bites from Tucker or any of the players about Katin. So it was nice to hear from him. He's a fast talker. He's got a lot of energy. You can kind of tell that he's kind of got that youthful enthusiasm about him. He did today, being in the room. You can tell that he has matured over these last few months, just even since, last we heard from him in spring practice. Seems more confident. I know, like we talked about this in the last couple of pods, but it does seem like maybe Noah Kim is trending a little bit for that starting spot if you trust the Las Vegas odds makers, or just what some of the chatter we heard out of Big Ten media days. But Katin shouldn't be counted out in this race, and you noted it yourself, saying that you thought that it was his job to lose, just based on like all the ingredients are kind of there for him to kind of seize this job. The fact that Noah Kim does have some experience, but it's not like an overwhelming amount of experience that Katin Houser has to overcome. I think Noah Kim's thrown 19 passes, taken 38 snaps, so there's not a huge gap there. The arm talent is noted, a 4-star prospect out of high school. So it was just good to see Katin and to kind of just bounce some questions off of him. It sounds like I want to say he's taken Sam Leavitt under his wing, but he was asked about how have you helped him, and as Sam begins his process. And actually, I asked Noah Kim about that today too, and Kim's response was, as a freshman, you kind of come in and you try to be perfect. You try to make every throw and do everything just perfect the first time, and that was Kim's advice to Sam, is just to go out and play and just treat it like any kind of practice, and you're not going to be perfect. You find out pretty quickly that you're not going to be perfect, and you've got a lot to learn and things to refine and things like that. So that was Noah's advice to Sam over these last today in the first practice, and then even going back to summer conditioning. Katin had talked about that a little bit, and just kind of getting his feet wet and making him feel welcome in the quarterback room and things like that. So it does sound like those three guys have, I don't want to say bonded, because it's only been a couple months here, but they have that chemistry amongst themselves as being a position group. Katin did say that he and Noah have become close friends over the last year since Katin's been there, and they had a discussion about the competition and not wanting it to impact that, but obviously they're both competitors. They're both gonna go and put their best foot forward and do what's best for the team, which is pushing each other and may the best man win type of thing. So I don't know if you had a chance to listen to any of the comments today, Aiden, or not, but did you get a chance?
I have not yet. No.
Okay, not yet.
I did watch a lot of the videos from the practice. So
okay, any observations?
I would say, in terms of the quarterback battle as a whole, I think just as the media and fans kind of as a whole, I think people underrate Noah Kim's arm talent. I think, Tucker talked about how kind of good his arm talent was. And, Katin Houser obviously came in with a much larger pedigree, and there was, you could see highlights of him from high school where he could really flash the arm talent. And we've seen kind of Noah Kim in the times we have seen him in games, kind of, he just does the right thing. Like, he does what the coaches ask him to do, and he's really disciplined about his, decision making and everything. But when I was watching some of the practice, videos by various media members, you could really see how kind of underrated his arm talent is, and how sneaky good he can really, throw a ball, 30 yards down the field or 40 yards down the field, kind of with some ease. And I think that, to me, I think that might, show up a little bit more as we get closer to the season, in terms of videos, whether it's posted by, people like the media coming in and posting videos, or what we see from, the MSU site or the MSU page posting practice videos. So I think that's something to look out for in terms of this QB battle. But yeah, I mean, from what you're saying about Houser, he just kind of, their relationship. Obviously, they don't want this competition to be toxic because you have to be a leader of this team playing quarterback. So they both really understand that. And it seems like, they both really want to bounce back, and they both understand the bad taste that was left in their mouth last season, and kind of, the whole Peyton Thorne situation. I'm guessing they've had plenty of talks about that as well.
Sure.
And what happened in the spring and him leaving. So just all things considered, that, obviously you want that to be a healthy competition. And like you said, it was kind of just may the best man win for them.
Yeah, and you could definitely, just being in the room today talking to both guys, but especially with Katin, I kind of felt Peyton Thorne's fingerprints on Katin's demeanor a little bit, and I mean that in a positive way. I think at one point he was asked about competing for the job, and his response was, well, I've kind of looked at it as, right now me and Noah are competing against the defense, and we're not competing against each other. I think Peyton might have said that even last spring, when I know that Peyton was the incumbent starter going into last year, but Tucker does like to open up every position every spring, and and that was one of the things that Peyton said, I think even last year, was we're competing against the defense, we're not competing against each other right now. And so that was kind of interesting to hear Katin kind of repeat that. Maybe it's something that comes from Jay Johnson too, but also there was also a nice little nugget from Katin. I typed up the quote here. He was asked about Peyton transferring, and Katin said that he had heard some rumors before Peyton transferred. There was some rumblings before the news dropped, and then so he wasn't totally shocked by it, but he mentioned how Peyton was a leader of the team, and so there was a void there after Peyton left, and he said, I kind of realized that this was his opportunity to step up and seize more of a leadership role. And it sounds like he's done that. I know he's put some work in with some of the younger receivers, going back to spring practice into the summer. That's another interesting dynamic here too, is the fact that Montorie Foster, Trey Mosley, and Christian Fitzpatrick, they go down to Virginia to run routes and catch balls from Noah Kim this summer and hang out with him a few days. And then Katin has his relationship with the guys he came in with, in Antonio Gates Jr. and Tyrell Henry and Jerron Glover. So it's really interesting. And we talked about this in a past pod, but it does feel like the winner of the quarterback battle is going to impact who ends up winning some spots at the receivers too. I mean, Trey Mosley is pretty well locked into one of those starting spots, but those three younger second year guys are competing with some veterans in Fitzpatrick and Foster for those other two spots. And then you add in Alante Brown to the mix, the transfer from Nebraska, and there's a healthy dose of competition there. That was a bit of a concern when Keon Coleman transferred, was who's going to fill, like he was expected to be the go-to guy. I feel like some of those fears have been alleviated just by, a wide array of options that Michigan State has at that wide receiver position. Any thoughts on that?
I would say, I think it's interesting that Montorie Foster was one of the players that was open to the media today. So that could be, maybe a bit of a hint. And like you said, he and Trey Mosley and some of the older guys went out to Virginia in the spring to work with Kim. So I think, yeah, it's going to be something to look out for. Obviously, Trey Mosley kind of, he gave the answer that, every player would give at media day about whether or not they prefer one quarterback or the other. And he was just like, kind of, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was just kind of like, you just got to catch passes from whoever it is. And kind of just, you got to focus on your job as a receiver, and can't really control who's going to be the starter. It's just worrying about your job. But yeah, I mean, Montorie Foster is kind of a guy that hasn't really been talked about as much. And obviously there's a really good class with those rising sophomores between Antonio Gates Jr., Tyrell Henry, Jerron Glover. So, and Katin Hauser had a previous relationship with Jeremy Bernard before he left for Washington. So I think there might be a little bit of, love lost, and not love lost, but, a little bit of disappointment in that way,
Sure.
that Bernard can't be there. But at the same time, you still have three really good young players that all have an opportunity to step up. And I think, Montorie Foster could be another guy who, he's battled through injuries and is an older guy that could really bloom onto the scene this year. And, Mosley also talked about at media day kind of where he would play, whether it be more of in the slot or going back to outside, because he came in as an outside receiver out of high school. So, there could be something there with that, where if, a younger guy may be a little less developed, or, a younger guy may be better in the slot or something like that, he could move to the outside as well. So I think there's a lot they could do. I think, Courtney Hawkins has done a really good job the few years that he's been here, with developing guys. Even in, 2020, there was still, Ricky White showing some flashes of being really good. And then obviously the development of Jaden Reed, Keon Coleman, Trey Mosley. So I think there's a lot to work with there. And, I wouldn't be worried about the wide receiver room right now.
Yeah, I actually wanted to comment a little bit on what you said about, Noah Kim and, the arm talent that he showcased the other day at practice. But we saw glimpses of that not only this past spring, but even I remember in the last year's spring going into 2022, he had some throws that was like, whoa, that kind of caught you off guard, like some deep throws and hitting guys in stride. And then you throw in the fact that Mel Tucker called him one of the 20 fastest players on the team. And all of a sudden you've got this guy who maybe is a dual threat guy, and Michigan State hasn't had a true dual. When's the last true dual threat guy that Michigan State had?
I can't really remember. I mean, I guess you could consider Thorne when healthy somewhat, sure. But
Lewerke, I would say a little bit more than Thorne.
Yeah. There wasn't, but I would say both schemes weren't really catered towards a dual threat quarterback. So
it's been a while since Michigan State's had a quarterback who really could impact the game with his legs. I know there's been certain guys. I mentioned Brian Lewerke. I want to say this is going back before your time even, but I want to say Drew Stanton was a combo type quarterback who could do some damage with his legs. That's going back quite a ways there. No. But my perception though is, you notice, you mentioned the arm talent that Noah has showed off. Tucker mentions the thing that he brings with his legs, the mobility, the maybe elusiveness. So that kind of lends me to believe if Noah has that up here as far as being able to read defenses and break down what he's seeing, if he's developed that as well, that sounds like a starting quarterback to me. To bring those different factors, the mobility, the arm talent, and then if you can break down what you're seeing and understand it and make quick decisions, that's the makings of a really solid to very good starting quarterback. So definitely excited to see kind of where that competition goes over the next several weeks. I probably asked you this before, but what's your impression? Are we going to find out who the starting quarterback is before September 1st, or are we going to find out when the team takes the field for the first time that day?
I don't think it'll be officially announced before September 1st, but I think all indications are pointing towards Noah Kim as the starter. And kind of as we inch toward the season, the more I kind of believe that he's going to be the starting QB really for this team, because it does seem like he's emerged as just a leader in general. And, all else considered, you want your quarterback to be the leader. And I think both of these guys can lead, but I really think this team is starting to rally around Kim, and kind of the other, veteran players are starting to rally and kind of get behind him as well. And again, like, it's gonna be a healthy competition. I still, I think it is, and I still think that Katin Hauser has a chance to win it. But yeah, again, like, I was kind of leaning towards Hauser a couple weeks ago, but now I'm kind of really looking at it. It seems like Kim is gonna be the guy.
Yeah, and then we'll see if it like whoever is named the starter really.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get into games, like it might be based on performance at that point too. Like if one guy gets named the starter and the team struggles a little bit, maybe if it's a close battle in fall, I guess that might be a factor too. And like, let's say, player X is named the starter a full 2 weeks before Central Michigan. That would indicate that there's a good separation between the two. Whereas if it's a ongoing battle all the way up into game day or the days leading up to the game, and then we find out on game day, then that kind of lends itself to maybe if things start off a little rough, maybe give the other guy a shot. I'm pure speculation there, but just some things to think about as the weeks go on. We're getting close to football. We still have some days to think about the storylines leading up to the season.
Right.
Moving on to another topic, one of the things that has been prevalent, I guess, one of the prevalent storylines going back to Big Ten Media Days, it was brought up again today, is defensive tackle Jalen Sammy, and just the size that he brings for Michigan State up front, and just the Michigan State, the fact that Michigan State has added more size in the trenches in general, but the name is the one that always is coming up because just of a guy who's over 300 pounds. Tucker said, he can run. He runs really well at his size. Can make tackles on outside runs despite being an interior guy. So, I guess, what do you expect to see from Jalen Sammy this fall, and how does he help plug up the run game right away for Michigan State to start the year?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of D linemen to be excited about, and that rotation between him, Derek Harmon, Simeon Barrow. I'm sure I'm leaving out, a guy or two.
Maverick somewhere. Hansen, maybe.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, there's a lot to like and be excited about. Obviously, you got the edge rushers too. Kind of just talking about the D line as a whole, there's a lot to be excited about. And obviously, Tunmish Adelaide, he's a guy that's 6'5", 280, I think. And Tucker said he's gonna play on the edge. So there's a lot of size just inside and out. Yeah, it's 6'6", 330. He's a large human being, football or not. So,
right.
Yeah. And, he's definitely a good athlete. That's a healthy 330. So there's a lot to like there. Just, in Big Ten football in general, when you go to play, teams like Michigan or Iowa or Minnesota, who are all teams that are on your schedule, that, they intend to run the ball a ton, and they intend to just, play and beat you in the trenches. So having guys like Jalen Sammy is definitely, a good thing, and something you really want on, any Big Ten roster. So, yeah.
Matthew Manning, appreciate your question, your comment. We actually just wrapped up our quarterback talk, but I see you're on Facebook. If you're able to rewind, we're doing a live show, but if you're able to rewind for about 10 to 15 minutes, we just went through all of the quarterback stuff. So that'll answer a couple of your questions there. But we do appreciate the questions. Yeah, I mean, it's really an interesting dynamic, especially at tackle, just because despite the struggles of Michigan State's defense in 2021, the run defense was solid, and especially in the red zone, it helped Michigan State kind of really buck up in the red zone, force some field goals. And if Michigan State wasn't giving up explosives, they were doing a pretty good job on defense in 2021. Then you go to last year, and you have injuries to Jacob Slade and some other guys. You get the suspensions, and the D line is kind of devastated. You've got defensive tackles playing on the edge, and it just wasn't a good combination of events. So the thing is, can Michigan State get back to what they were in 2021 and at least stop something? Like if you're good at one thing and you've got a weakness somewhere else, at least you're good at one thing, right? And they weren't good. They weren't good at either one of them last year. So I think that's a big time win out of the transfer portal for Mel Tucker. It fills a need. You mentioned Tanmis Adedele, another guy who size, speed, sideline to sideline mobility. We saw him make a play in the spring game that like caught your eye because it's a running back bouncing on the outside and he chases him down. So definitely, as you said, I think we've talked about this before. The defensive line might be the deepest and best unit on the team heading into 2023. I think that's what I believe right now. So what is that? How does that translate, I guess, to what Michigan State is going to do this season? We'll find out here before too long. Let's see. What else do we have on the docket here?
You got new uniforms as well.
Yeah, we got. Well, we're going to get
touched that a little bit last pod.
We touched the new uniforms a little bit last time, but I do want to talk and give more full thoughts now that we've got a chance to really get a good look at them. But before we do that, defensive backs. Let's talk defensive backs just a little bit because we did get to hear from Dillon Tatum. He is exclusively playing cornerback, it sounds like, this year. He bounced back and forth between safety, and I think he played a little bit of nickelback maybe in corner last year. So he got a kind of a wide range of duties last year and learned a lot of different spots. He talked about that today, just how much ahead of where he feels like he was at this time last year as a true freshman, just because he's learned multiple positions. But he is dialed into that cornerback spot right now. Maybe he's a guy opposite Charles Brantley this year. He talked about Jaden Mangum and Malik Spencer at safety. The language he used, it did sound like it's going to be Mangum and Spencer maybe as the starters back there, just the way Dillon talked today. Didn't come out and say that, but I think he was asked a question about the secondary, and those were the first two names he kind of threw out there was, those safeties being back there. So it does sound like they are in the lead for those spots. Is Tatum a guy who you expect to be that number 2 starter behind Charles Brantley, assuming Charles Brantley's still that number 1 guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tatum is definitely a contributor, if not a starter, at the worst. I know there's a lot of high praise about other cornerbacks. Brantley obviously entered the portal for about a week and then came back. But yeah, there's a lot of other guys that, the coaching staff are really excited about. I've heard a lot of good things about Caleb Coley, who is another guy who's a sophomore, just like Tatum, who out of high school, I believe he ran a sub 4.40 in high school. So, he's got a lot of speed, and Tatum got a lot of, good time, playing time last year. And so did Mangum before he went down. And then you have Malik Spencer, who kind of emerged at the end of the season, and kind of the guys who were, heading out the door, like Xavier Henderson and such, really spoke highly of Malik Spencer, and just that whole defense has really spoke highly of him and how good he's going to be this year. So, it's not just that Tatum and like Mangum and Spencer and like those guys are going to be starting. It's that those guys are going to be starting for, multiple years, because all of them were in the 2022 recruiting class, or sorry, the 23 recruiting class. So that's something just, at the least, that's something to be excited about, just because that development is already kind of paying off and already kind of showing that these sophomores are really starting over, players that they brought in through the transfer portal. I know they brought in a few safeties. So that I think that's definitely really important and something, not super like read between the lines, but that is something to look forward to.
Yeah, I want to get to this question from Carrie Ellis, who just came through. Any good news on the special teams? Going to hurt not having Behringer. And if it comes to kicking field goals, we are not in good shape, it seems. I understand the sentiment given what we saw last year. Aiden and I think you and I talked about this a little bit, maybe down at media days about, we haven't heard a whole lot about special teams, but Tucker did mention Jonathan Kim today. He's the transfer kicker from North Carolina. He was a kind of a kickoff specialist down there, but it does sound like he's going to get a shot to be kind of that, full-time kicker for Michigan State, get a chance to kick some field goals. He was mentioned by Tucker today in a complimentary fashion, talking about, just the leg strength and his ability to boot the ball from long distance and things like that. So we did hear from a little bit news on that. It kind of sounds like he might be that front runner for that starting kicking job. As far as punter and maybe other kicking options, I'm kind of drawing a blank here. I don't remember. I know that was brought up briefly in media days too, but there's been so much kind of information that's come out all at once. It's kind of lost. I mean, do you remember anything about anything more of the special team stuff?
Yeah, I know. I want to say his last name's O'Shaughnessy. I can't remember. I think his first name's Matt. They kind of believe that he's kind of the punter or in the starting position. I know he's in a competition with someone. I can't remember who their name is, but I know O'Shaughnessy is kind of the punter right now, along with Jonathan Kim as the kicker. We did talk about at media day, because the roster, the summer roster was revealed at media day, kind of when Tucker was speaking, actually.
Yeah.
We checked the roster and there were multiple, I think there were 3 kickers. Obviously Jonathan Kim is likely the scholarship guy, but there were 2 other players who I'm guessing are walk-ons. I'm sure they're not scholarship players. And then there were 2 or 3 punters. So that, they're definitely assessing that. That's something that is, when you have a good punter or a good kicker, it's something that you don't need to worry about. That I think that's a good thing. But then, obviously when you lose a guy like Behringer and then, the kicking game isn't sound, that's obviously a major concern, because that's the last thing, a head coach wants to worry about is the special teams being an issue, because that can really win and lose you games.
Right. And it probably, maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but it seems like special teams can lose you a game a whole lot quicker than it could win you a game. Like, there are certain situations that come up that, you can win a game with a field goal or by downing a punt inside, the 5 with, a minute left or something like that. But more often than not, special teams will lose you a game. So yeah, definitely something that needs to get corrected. It's kind of an interesting dynamic too. Speaking specifically to, I think Ross Ells is the special teams coordinator for Michigan State. And obviously with Behringer, they're really good in the punting game. I also think Michigan State was one of the better teams in kick return coverage last year based on the numbers, and they didn't have very many touchbacks, but they did a good job in kick return. But then long snapping was a mess last year when Mason Arnold got hurt. The kicking was a disaster, there's no doubt. How much pressure is there? How much is Ross Ells kind of on a hot seat in a sense if we don't see some improvement in the kicking game here?
Honestly, it's hard to tell. I mean, obviously you don't want to be thinking about special teams. It's something that, you want it to help you win games, but you don't want it to hurt you. You don't want to lose games for it. I don't think Ross Ells is really, I wouldn't say he's on the hot seat. right now because obviously you have Behringer, but yeah, really figuring out that kicking game is important because those kicks weren't blocked; they were just kind of missed. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's not kind of like the LSU situation where they had a bunch of kicks blocked
Sure.
last season. They just didn't go their way. So that's something to think about. And then obviously even like on the offensive side, like the punt return and kick return unit, you had Jaden Reed back there,
Right.
and Tyrell Henry is you know one of the fastest, if not the fastest player on the team, and he played a lot in the alongside Reed last year. So that's something to look out for, just as a guy replacing. Reed is another player who's going to be hard to replace because he returned. I don't think he returned any kicks back last season, but I remember 2021 he returned a punt back and a kick back. So that's something to look forward to as well.
I didn't plan on doing like hot seat talk today, but we've got another question about Hazelton. So I'm not gonna do the whole hot seat thing again with Hazelton, but I will say I read one of my old stories from last year. I don't remember how it came up, maybe in one of my like Facebook memories or something like that. And it was a story from early in the year, maybe just after Minnesota, and it was pretty. I was pretty scalding of Scotty Hazelton. It did seem like things improved as the year went on in certain areas. I'll just throw this question at you, Aiden. What do we need to see from Michigan State's defense to reassure you that Scotty Hazelton is the right man for that defensive coordinator job?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hazelton in 2020, walked into a, very, MSU had like the number one total defense in like 2018. And then like 2 years later, it definitely took a drop back. And, Hazelton really had to assess a lot of different issues. Obviously, the defensive backs have been something talked about, but I would just say for reassurance this year, it would just be having that team healthy.
Yeah.
As long as that team, as long as that defensive line is healthy and you're not, panicking and moving guys around, you can really get a fair assessment of whether Hazelton has improved this team or not. Because, last year it was hard to tell when you were on your sixth or seventh string guy. So I mean, I did see growth last year from the defensive backs towards the end of the season. I think, they played well against Illinois, and while they did lose to Michigan, they held them to less than 30 points. I think they played well. They were fired up for that game. So
Right.
there is that. And yeah, I know that the third down is definitely
Yes.
something like area of concern. But yeah, having that D line helps a lot of those defensive backs, because if you create pressure and keep quarterbacks off balance, that changes a lot too, and that helps defensive backs out. So, I wouldn't be worried about the rushing defense because that D line is a lot larger, and you have downhill kind of run stuffing linebackers with Windman and Cal Holiday. So, there's a lot to like, but yeah, just as long as these guys stay healthy, then that's kind of how you get a fair assessment of how much they've developed.
Right. With this question, we'll kind of make the transition now. I feel like this is a good, nice little entry point for you. Cameron asked if we got to see the locker room. We did not. We haven't. I was kind of hoping we might get some kind of invitation through Michigan State to see it, but no. All we've seen is what was revealed on social media through Michigan State's official Twitter page. I'm sure they put something on Facebook too. And Darius Snow has taken the phone and he's kind of showing things off. I think the hilarious moment was guys are just going crazy. Guys are going nuts. And Cal Halliday walks by and Darius asks him, "What do you think, Cal?" And he goes, "It's nice. It's nice." And that's all we got out of Cal Halliday. But that's just totally his personality. He's just there to play football, man. I tweeted, I think Darian Harris, the new NIL the leader of NIL, if you want to call him that, for Michigan State, he had a reaction to that, and I think I replied to Darian, and I just said, Cal would get dressed in an actual woodshed. He just wants to go play football. Like he doesn't care what the locker room looks like. But it was kind of a funny reaction. But what was your reaction to? We've been kind of waiting for this. We've been waiting on what this Tom Izzo football building is going to look like. What was your reaction to seeing the layout of the locker room? It looked like they had some like recovery, some kind of like long pool looking thing where you maybe walking back and forth, and refreshments are there. And then you get to the locker room, and each guy's got their own like mini sofa type thing looking, and plenty of compartments, the shoes, the cleats, place for your shoulder pads. Just as you were taking it all in, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it looks really nice. It's something that I wish I had like comfortably. You had so much storage and a locker with chargers and stuff. Like that's definitely it's beyond kind of that team. Obviously, the team loves to have it, but you can really sell recruiting a lot more. You can sell recruiting a lot better, and when boosters come, they know what that money's going towards, and kind of you have a better sense of it's that money's being used well, and right. Kind of they're getting that state of the art, keeping up with their competitors like Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, even SEC teams for recruits. When you go and recruit nationwide, you can, you have that measuring stick that you have those similar type locker rooms to, the USC or Texas, like other schools nationwide when you go to recruit in California and Georgia and Florida. So that's a big deal. And, obviously the current players get to benefit the most from that. But that really just sells recruiting as well. And I randomly ran across this on Twitter earlier, but people were kind of upset, or not upset, but thought it was funny that it was the Tom Izzo Football Building, about how is the basketball coach. And I kind of just chuckled to myself, because it's like, who cares who donates the money? Like it's still a really nice facility. All things considered.
Yeah, and anybody who knows Tom Izzo knows the fact that he absolutely loves football. I mean, he said on multiple occasions that he wants to someday he wants to be a football coach instead of a basketball coach. That's kind of like one of them. I'll say it's a running gag, but I honestly believe him when he says it, that he would love to be able to coach football. So, and then he puts forth a sizable donation to help cover the cost of the building. So it makes perfect sense to me. It's kind of like one of those things that were maybe on a very surface level, it's a little strange, but if you know anything about Tom Izzo, it does make sense. I did want to say, there's a section of the Michigan State fan base that, and I understand it, but with the new uniforms that came out, and then with the locker room, you get that section of the fan base that kind of scoffs a little bit and says, we don't care about this, just win games on the field. Who cares about the glamour? And I totally get the mindset and the assertion there that like none of this, when you lose, none of this is very cool when you lose, and I get that. I will say though, it is a big recruiting tool. And one of the things that Tucker said today during his media availability, he was asked about the locker room and the guys' excitement, and he talked about how that's something that they missed from last year, because when they went to practice, because there was a bit of a, not really commute, but there was a longer distance to travel to get to practice. And then when practice was over, guys weren't hanging around after practice, hanging out together, having some of that, just shooting the breeze after practice, and just that time of fellowship off the football field. Like that was a little bit lacking last year, and it makes sense because they didn't have that place to go to. And he talked the importance of players having that space where they're away from the coaches a little bit and they can just interact with one another and the positivity that can bring. But also another thing, the thing that really stuck out to me with what Tucker said was when he took over the job, he said one of the things that Mark D'Antonio told him was, "You've got to get new facilities here," and that kind of surprised me a little bit because when I think Mark D'Antonio, I think more of that gritty and that toughness, and taking 3-star guys who come in and just put the work in, and they go on and they to steal something from Dan Campbell, bite the kneecaps off people. That's kind of what the sense I get from Mark D'Antonio too. But even he recognizes the importance of updated facilities, the facilities that when you bring a recruit in, it takes them back a little ways, and to your point, competing with those teams from the South and the other major programs in the Big Ten, like Michigan State wants to be one of those consistent, competitive championship caliber programs like they were in the 2010s. They want to get back to that level, and part of that is keeping pace with some of these other programs. So how much do you think we're going to see that reflected? I mean, the number one thing is they got to get some things right on the field. That's the baseline. You got to show improvement on the field. But how much can this really help with recruiting going into the 2020, like finishing up the 2024 class and then beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're thinking long term. When you have these facilities, you have that 2024 class, 2025, 2026, in mind. So I think that's really important. I know they're trying to add to that. They have 12 guys right now. They're really taking some big swings at some big time recruits. Like David Stone is obviously the big name and kind of the big fish that they're trying to land, and they haven't landed a 5-star recruit in the Tucker era, and they've come really close to a lot, 3 or 4 different guys where they're in the hunt, where they're second or third in a really competitive battle with some really good football programs. And I think that facility upgrade might be that might be the difference now, and it could be in the future. And that they have some nice facilities, they had nice facilities, and they really upgraded on a lot more. And I think like you were saying about Tucker, with just the team bonding in general, it goes beyond that too. So when those players get here, they can build those like deeper relationships and everything. And you don't really think of that kind of side, or you don't really think of that aspect outside of just like, hey, they put in millions of dollars, and all these players got some really nice things. And it's not that just that they have it, it's that they use it, and
Sure.
they use that space, because MSU has really battled that in the past couple of years of having they feel Tucker has talked about that, about how they felt like they've had smaller facilities than the Alabamas or the Michigans of the world, and they want to get to that level. And in order to compete at a consistent level with Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State in the Big Ten, they have to get to that level of having those large and like up-to-date facilities. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing.
Just want to respond quickly to Kerry Ellis. I see your question about the 2-0 start and things like that. Let's end the show with that question. But before we get to that, let's briefly kind of just give our thoughts on the uniforms now that we had it, they dropped right at the end of our last show, so we kind of gave some quick thoughts. I'll start off as a traditionalist and as one of those people who is very toe the line when it comes to color scheme. I was a little nervous about a black jersey reveal, but I gotta say, I think Michigan State and Nike really knocked these out of the park. I think they did a really good job. I like the the spackled egg type helmet, the look to it, the green Spartan head. I think my favorite feature, and this goes across all of the new line of uniforms, is the Greek key helmet stripe. I think it really pops, especially on the green helmets with the white. I think it shows up great. I will say, and this is going to sound like I'm bashing the black uniforms. I'm not. I like them. I really do. But I still think of the four guys who were photoed, I think Mosley was in the all blacks. Halliday had a green jersey, white pants. Duplain was all green, and I think it was Bogle. Aaron,
Yeah.
it was
Chris
Bogle
Bogle
Chris. He was in
was all
the
white.
all whites. I think the other three I liked even better than the blacks, and
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody was kind of going nuts about the black uniforms, and understandably so. That's a very modern trend, and so there's a few. Like I'm in my 30s now, low 30s, but I'm in my 30s now, so I think that's a little bit more for the 20-year-olds out there, which is fine. Like I said, I like them a lot. But for me, I liked the other ones even better. What were your thoughts once you got to really dig in and look at the uniforms, Aiden?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the all black uniforms. I've never really been a fan of like the green jersey, white pants. I just didn't think that
Fair.
mixes well. But I like the all kind of. I mean, I was kind of a fan of like the NFL when they did like the color rush scheme. So like all green, I love. Like the all black, I'm totally on board. That's really great. And then the all white, I really like that too. And I think, the fact that the all black jersey is going to be kind of it's a regular and it's
Yeah.
a rotational jersey and not just an alternate. I think that's really cool. And I really like that. And I know people bash the neon green, but
Don't do it.
a lot of the recruits love the neon green. So I think that's something that people gotta, that's another recruiting tool that MSU is using. And, you know, yeah, I mean, maybe they incorporate some neon in the black uniforms in the future too. I think, they've kind of they'll test the waters this year of what they can do with the different combinations. And like you said, yeah, I like the Greek pattern for the stripe on the helmet too. I think that's a good modern touch to it.
Yep.
And yeah, again, it all comes down to recruiting and helping them get these big time players.
Yeah, Drew, I'm with you on the neons. I think if Michigan State buries the neons, I think that is a good thing. Again, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I agree with Drew on the neons. I do think though, um, you might be able to pull off the neon with the black. I think that's just a natural good combo. I know they do it in the basketball uniforms too, where they've
Mhm.
got the all blacks and they've got the neon. I think it says Spartans over the top, and then the numbers and things like that. So that could be in the works down the line. But the neon pants, man, I like that's going back even a couple years because they kind of did away with the neon pants pretty quickly. But
Mhm.
those were bad, man. I'm sorry. And I think a big part of it too was the state across the jersey in neon.
It was
Just
too
something about that
big.
font. It was
Yeah.
too big. The font was just. It was like something from Microsoft Paint or something. I didn't like those. So I think there's a way to do it right. I just don't think they did a very good job on those last ones. But it looks like with the four images that we got, that's what we're going to go forward with, or Michigan State's going to go forward with. Um, so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what those look like on the field. I know we're kind of an elevated view up in the press box, but looking forward to seeing those on the field, and when we watch replays and study. We not that we are studying film or anything, but I go back and look at some plays here and there on
Mhm.
YouTube or whatnot. So it's going to be cool to see those uniforms really pop off the screen. All right, we've got a couple questions to answer. Hopefully, we can do it quickly, and then we'll get you guys out of here. Let's start with Kerry Ellis. He asked about, is a 2-0 record enough to kind of bring people back off the fence before the Washington game? Talks about low expectations right now. I don't see how beating Central Michigan and Richmond does a whole lot as far as inspiring confidence. Like, you have to win those games. Like, that's a baseline thing. So I don't think a 2-0 start does that. Um, Off the top of my head, I can't remember who's after Washington. I should have pulled up the schedule before I.
I think it's Maryland.
Is it Maryland? You look that up. I'll continue my thoughts on this. So, I mean, all eyes, well, I say all eyes are going to be on that Washington game, but it's going to be on Peacock. So who knows how many eyes are going to be on that game. And we know my thoughts on that. I shared that on a previous show when that was announced. But yeah, I think we're not really going to know what to expect from this team until we get to that Washington game. So no, I don't think a 2-0 start is enough. And that's not to say if you lose to Washington, there's going to be, pitchforks and torches, but that's one of those games where you have to show improvement. And I hate that. I even hate that mindset, like going into a game, and I would never advocate that. Like, I coach basketball, Aiden, you coach football. So we would never tell our players, well, if you keep it close, so that's not in our DNA at all. But there is a difference between going out there and competing on your home field and giving a team that I think at worst is going to be preseason top 15. If you go in there and you fight them tooth and nail, that will give you confidence for games to come, even if you lose that game. But you've got to be competitive. You got to go in and punch Washington in the mouth a little bit. That's a chance to show some improvement. Jim Salgado, the new cornerbacks coach, what have these younger defensive backs gleaned from him? What kind of impact can he make? That's where we kind of get the first one of those answers to that question, is that game. So I think we got to wait on that. Did I miss anything, Aiden, as far as that point?
No, I agree. I think it's not as much of how big are you going to win these games by, but it's more of kind of looking at it individually, where, if Noah Kim's the starter, like, is he showing, that crazy, like, a lot of great growth? Like, is Jalen Berger kind of, improving? Is Nathan Carter, who we expect him to be? Kind of what receiver emerges? Kind of, it's more individually for me of where where Michigan State is going to be heading into that Washington game, and then heading into Big Ten play, where, yeah, like, that's kind of where I'm at. Is the individuals, like, are they showing growth? And then that will kind of lead to, if fans are confident or not heading into that Washington game.
Right. So we're in agreement there. Okay. Aiden,
yeah.
What if they beat Washington?
If they beat Washington, you can't not put them in the top 25, right? You're riding high. You're heading into a Maryland game, which that's a tough Maryland team. That's a game, win or lose against Washington. That's a game you really have to get up for, because that Maryland team. I know Mike Loxley at the Big Ten Media Day, he was really adamant that this team is, ready. They're at the level that they're ready to compete for the Big Ten East, and he felt confident in saying that. And they return a lot of good players. So I think there's a lot to like about them. So win or lose that game, you really can't overlook Maryland. And that's a tough stretch, because you have Washington, Maryland, Iowa, and that's before you even get to October. So that's definitely tough.
It's a tough schedule. We've talked about that a lot this off season. And to reply to Carrie Ellis, you're not going to sneak up on anybody if you beat Washington. Okay, I think everybody would sign up for that right now. Yeah, we can't sneak up on anybody, but like 3-0 start, knocking off a preseason top 15 team, and then all of a sudden, boom, Michigan State's back, kind of in a bit of a spotlight there, and as Big Ten play is getting ready to kick off. Maryland is a sneaky football team. To your point, I think they bring back their starting quarterback. It would be easy. It'd be easy to scoff at Mike Loxley for saying Maryland's going to compete for the Big Ten East, just because we know how difficult that division is with Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. But I think Maryland won 8 or 9 games. I can't remember. 8 games last year, and they have ascended over the last 3 years. So that's the team that if Fortunately for Michigan State, they get them at home this year. And so if you can defend home field and start Big Ten playoff in the win column, that's another kind of notch in the belt. So again, big games in weeks 3 and 4. Let's finish with this, Aiden, and we'll try to be brief with it. But there has been a lot of chatter about realignment. With Colorado has already jumped ship and is headed to the Big 12. I think next year, as early as next year. I don't know. Maybe it's not next year, but I know the paperwork is signed and they're on their way back to the Big 12. There's a lot of chatter right now about Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah, the rest of the corner schools, along with Colorado, perhaps jumping ship also and heading to the Big 12. It sounds like, based on some of the stuff that I've read, it sounds like the Big Ten is kind of waiting to see what those three schools do, Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah, before they jump in the Oregon and Washington pool. Because, again, this is based on stories that I've read, maybe even as early as last night. It sounds like the Big Ten doesn't want to be the conference that delivers the death blow to the Pac-12. The Pac-12 and the Big Ten do have that relationship through the Rose Bowl that goes back many, many years. I saw some people on social media and things like that talking about, what are you talking about? The Big Ten delivered the death blow when they stole USC and UCLA. But USC and UCLA, they wanted out. Like, they were going to leave regardless if the Big Ten accepted the proposal or not. And if the Big Ten doesn't accept the proposal, then you risk losing them to the SEC, and that conference, which is already adding Texas and Oklahoma, becomes even more powerful. So I don't think you can blame the Big Ten for reacting to Texas and Oklahoma jumping ship to the SEC and saying, hey, we got to bring in a couple name brands ourselves. So at this point, we've talked about, we're both in agreement on realignment, how we don't like it and how we feel like it's damaging the fabric of college athletics. It's gotten to the point now, though, where I'm almost ready for a complete reshuffling, so that maybe if the Big Ten adds Oregon and Washington, maybe even a Cal and a Stanford, I know there's some rumblings about them too, maybe some of the regionality of college athletics is saved through that, because if you add Washington and Oregon, now you've got at least 4 schools that are on the West Coast, and those 4 teams are probably going to play each other almost every year in this super mega Big Ten, which all of a sudden has 18 teams. So I think that's probably where we're headed at some point. And again, the landscape has been so damaged by conference realignment that I'm almost like all for anything that's just wipe the slate clean. Let's redraw the map again and try to figure out how we can save as many of these regional rivalries as possible. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the sad reality of college football is that it comes down to money and that it's a business at the end of the day. And that's really just the sad reality of it, and why this conference realignment is happening to begin with. And I'll assess the FSU and Clemson thing quickly, because the ACC, I think FSU has really been the leader in this, of trying to get out of the ACC and trying to bring Clemson and Miami and some other, like Duke and North Carolina kind of on board to get out of it. But from my understanding is that the ACC, the contract that they sign with the ACC is a lot harder to get out of than what, the Pac-12 and USC and UCLA. And so kind of what FSU is trying to do is to just bring it down as a whole, and it kind of, the ACC might dissolve as a whole, as like completely, if that happens, if they're trying to really get out. And Florida State's just trying to find, a new home, whether it be the Big Ten or the SEC. And I don't think they want to join the Big 12, but they, that might have to be an option that they look at, because this realignment stuff is crazy. But for Oregon and Washington, I mean, geographically, it does make sense to have more schools further out west.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, just the Pac-12 dissolving as a whole is kind of it's crazy to think about. And the fact that Oregon and Washington kind of weren't the leaders to begin with, or like they kind of weren't exploring as soon as they were, is it's a bit surprising, because I would have guessed Oregon, with the Nike money and kind of the brand they've built over the past 20, 30 years, I would have thought they would kind of be on top of that. And I think they do. I think they do know that somewhat, though. I think they do know that they can hold their own financially, but the rest of the Pac-12 they're really struggling. I don't even think they have a TV rights deal set in place for this season.
Apple TV,
right?
Jeez.
Right. So they don't even have, the Pac-12 doesn't even have a TV deal to begin with. So that's kind of crazy. And just, I mean, yeah, it comes down to a business, because if you look at it, they have a lot of solid, they have a lot of good teams this year. USC is going to be good. Obviously, they return a Heisman winner, and they have Lincoln Riley as their coach and everything. Washington looks promising. Oregon looks really good, and there's teams like Oregon State who could be competing for the Pac-12, and you have teams like Utah who have won that conference multiple times. So
right,
just, yeah, again, the sad reality is that it comes down to money, and that it's a business. And the college football that I grew up with, even when MSU going to the Rose Bowl, it's a completely different landscape 10 years from now. And then 10 years from now, it's going to be even more different, and we could be talking about just the Big Ten and the SEC as two 20 or 25 team leagues. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it does seem like it's becoming more like the NFL, which the NFL is great being the NFL, but I've never liked the push by certain people to just do what the NFL does. Like, I think there's something unique about college football that is being lost kind of through this, and it's unfortunate. Right. I'm still going to keep watching it because it's my favorite sport to watch. But yeah, there is something being lost by this realignment. As far as like fits, Florida State, I think, would fit okay in the Big Ten. I think it certainly makes more sense to a better fit in the SEC. They already play Florida every year.
Right.
Clemson, I definitely see as more of an SEC fit than a Big Ten fit. The ironic thing is, Miami is a private school, and so like maybe even could be considered like the Northwestern of the South, if you will. And so like they kind of like, I see Miami as more of a fit for the Big Ten. Same kind of goes for Duke or North Carolina. So it's an interesting dynamic there with those schools. But yeah, I mean, somebody mentioned, you mentioned Oregon State, being a better team. The unfortunate thing is the Pac-10 and then the Pac-12 was such an afterthought for so long that it ultimately led to this. And then right when USC hires Lincoln Riley, right when UCLA hires Chip Kelly, they get their act together. Washington gets its act together, hiring Kalen DeBoer. First, Chris Peterson did a good job there, and then Kalen DeBoer. So Washington gets its act together. All of a sudden, Jonathan Smith goes to Oregon State, and they're a competitive football team. Oregon's been good for a while now. So the Pac-12 finally gets its act together just in time for the league to just completely dissolve, is what it seems like. And so it's really unfortunate. The timing just, if you could have done this, if those teams would have gotten their act together 3 years earlier, they might have been able to secure a new television deal through either ESPN or Fox or somebody, but it was just too little, too late at that point, and we're seeing the repercussions of that now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're at an hour and 15 minutes, so I think we've taken up enough of you guys' time.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the comments. Drew, you mentioned Darius Snow. I don't know if you had a chance to check out the story I wrote on Darius Snow from Big Ten Media Days. I will admit it wasn't a big, huge update or anything like that, but Mel Tucker did at least talk about Darius a little bit in that piece. So if you want to check out the Facebook page, you won't have to scroll too far before you find that story about Darius Snow. For the rest of you, really appreciate you guys tuning in. Long show today, but you guys stuck it out. Appreciate all the questions, all the the feedback in the comment section. And yeah, we're getting close to football season. We kicked off practice today, or we didn't kick it off, but Michigan State kicked off practice today. 24 more practices, and then we're going to be at Spartan Stadium for Central Michigan. Can't wait to see it. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys next time.